Oh, okay. Here we are. Episode 4 of the I Help Men Dress Better podcast. I think that's what we've settled on at this point. Please don't be copyrighted. Please don't sue me. Yeah. We've arrived. We've arrived at the final archetype. And that's not to say that this is the last time we will talk about the archetypes, because there is just so much to talk about. And yeah. So, episode 1, we just dove into what are the 3 archetypes. Episode 2, we walked through the refined archetype. Episode 3, the rugged archetype. And today we are in my personal favorite. And that's not to say that it is the best. It is just to say that it is my personal favorite. The rebel archetype. So, the rebel is a lot like the refined archetype in that you're very aware of the rules. You're very aware of kind of how society functions and hierarchies and what you are expected to do to succeed. But you, instead of going with it, like in the refined archetype, you go against it. So rebellion really does rely a lot on what you're rebelling against. So it really blows the idea that like wear what you want, or that like style is just whatever you want to wear, out of the water, because by definition it is looking externally. And that's not to say it's not also looking internally. I mean, the truth is all 3 of the archetypes are looking externally, right? The refined archetype is looking out into the world, learning the rules and following them. The rugged archetype is like physically interacting with the world. And the rebel archetype is looking out into the world and then looking inside and really putting his own agenda ahead, or looking at the world and saying like, this needs to be fixed, or this needs to be done better, or there's something that's wrong, or there's just something that it's great for other people, it's not for me, and because of that, like, I'm going to do my own thing, right? So that's sort of the mindset behind, or the archetypal mindset behind, right? That might not actually be your reason, but it's usually aligned with that. It's kind of a deep sense of self, or an interest in individuality, authenticity, noticing something in society that just doesn't really rub you the right way. And I think you see this a lot in kind of more rebel movements, right? Things like punk or goth or alternative, the way rock stars dress, the way, certain people, like you'll see people who, it's like kind of their whole career, they dress kind of like normal, and then they reach a certain point where they've kind of gained enough power and influence, and or they've kind of personally developed along that way, where they start to dress a little more interesting. And one of the challenging things about the rebel archetype is you sort of need something that you stand for. Like, it's because you're going against the grain, you're opening yourself up to like more risk than the rugged or the refined archetype, because you're not going with what society's expectations are, right? People know what the rugged archetype means, right? They know it's like, I work with my hands, I'm pretty physical. Like, we have a mental kind of roadmap of that. Same with refined, right? It's like, good, you're playing by the rules, like, we're good with you. As soon as you start to break the rules, though, right, like, anything that's cool wasn't cool right away. If you think about any style that's kind of entered the zeitgeist, right? Somebody was doing it. Somebody kind of rebellious was doing it, right? Punk is now super mainstream, but at the time it was really out there, right? It was so the opposite of what society was doing that, like, it was shocking. Like, people were concerned, right? I'm sure a lot of you grew up and, if you were attracted to the rebel archetype, or you were attracted to certain, kind of countercultural aesthetics, like, it made people nervous. People start projecting onto you, right? people decide that because you personally are rejecting an aesthetic, that it means that you're also, they kind of get to decide what else they think you're rejecting. So there's a risk there. There is a risk there people will project onto you. I think the positive side of that, and I think that this is the positive side of just kind of maturing, is that you get to decide kind of the more intentionally you rebel, you're deciding who, like what / who, that whose opinions are important. Because if people are projecting ill will onto you, yes, that's annoying, but if you reach a certain point, you can kind of take that step back and go like, I don't care. Project all the ill will on me. That sounds like a you problem. That's not a me problem, right? Okay, I've been kind of talking a lot around more of what's going on with the Rebel archetype, but what does that actually mean to dress like the Rebel archetype? And obviously we can all think of more like extreme examples, right? Like very punk, very goth, like very rock star. And for a lot of us, like we live, like, I mean, I walk the regular streets. You probably have a regular job. Even if you're an entrepreneur, like you're not looking to go full, insane clown posse makeup, right? Like that's not what we're doing here. We're not starting to dress like Kiss just because that's our, authentic selves. So, like, what does it actually mean to be rebel? And I think that this is a really good segue into how we really use the archetypes as a tool, right? Because I recently put out my quiz, so that is out. You can find that on my LinkedIn at Shlomo Hamnek, big pink banner. So I did put out my quiz, and great, you can take the quiz, find your primary archetype, and that's very exciting. I think for a lot of people that's kind of a big, interesting aha moment. There's some self-discovery that happens throughout the quiz, and that's awesome. But how is it actually practical? Like, then what do I do? Then where do I go from here? And I think that the Rebel archetype is a great place to start that conversation. So, style is communication. Style is language. That's the premise that, we're building everything upon. So, when we're using words like refined, rugged, rebel, we're bringing language it's sort of like translating, right? So it's like if you're learning Spanish, right? You get a Spanish word, you get an English translation. These archetypes, they're really just kind of like the English translations of clothing. So then we have to reverse engineer that. We have to turn that around, and we have to use that to start describing things. So let's say you find out you're refined. Great. Now you get to look out into the world and start seeing it through that lens, right? Embarrassing. It's not enough to just know that you are refined, rebel, rugged. You have to know how to apply that. So you're going to start looking out into the world, looking out at clothing, and asking yourself this question. Is this mainly, right? We can kind of look at this as, what is this mostly? Is this mostly refined? Is this mostly rugged? Or is this mostly rebellious? And I think you'll have reasonably easy answers to that, because even though until now you didn't have language for this, now that you have language, I think these are things we all intrinsically know, right? When you watch the movie Grease, right, John Travolta's character, we know that he is a rebellious character. How do we know that? Because of the way he's dressed. And so we know that the pieces of clothing that he's wearing and the way that he's put them together is rebellious. So then when we look out in the world, we can say, okay, leather jacket, usually rebellious, right? Suit jacket, refined, right? Denim jacket, rugged, right? So these are, now we can look out in the world and start describing the clothing that's on the shelf, in our closets, you know, what other people are wearing, what we're wearing. We can start looking at that and labeling it. And not labeling it in a way that's limiting, but labeling it in a way that is expansive, because we want to we we want to start understanding clothing as sort of a puzzle, because it's not enough to just know, okay, great, I'm the refined archetype, so suits are refined, I should wear suits. That might not be right for you contextually, so you have to know how to discern what clothing is, so that when you go out and dress for your context, it all makes sense. So I'm going to take a pause from this idea and go back to just the Rebel archetype. I want to look at a few Instagrams and show you a few people that I think embody the Rebel archetype, and I think that some of these examples will also help you understand that the archetype, the reason why it really works as a tool is because you can describe yourself, you can describe a garment, and then you can also describe how garments are put together into an outfit. So it really gives you, it's like this small body of language, but that's very expansive. It's a body of language that can really help you articulate and understand yourself, the types of clothing that kind of communicate what you want to communicate, and then how you can make that your own and mix and match and expand. So here we're going to share the screen. Share the screen. Screen share. Let's start here. This is going to be like kind of an extreme example of Rebel, and this is Vine Fits. I think he just has some really, really excellent outfits that are just really out there. He's doing a lot of high fashion, so yes, a lot of the things he's wearing are pretty expensive, but you can just see how he's taking sort of everyday looks and mixing them up. So whether that's with kind of the silhouette or the fit of the clothes, he's wearing clothing that don't fit in a way that your people are familiar with. So even that is just going to make you kind of stand out, stand against, like look different. But he's also pairing different sorts of pieces. Like you can see in this outfit here, this one, he's got a hoodie and a suit jacket. So maybe we can zoom that in. That didn't work so well. He's wearing a hoodie and a suit jacket. Now the suit jacket's cropped. It's got a boxy fit. So it's also in itself a pretty Rebel piece. He's taken a refined piece and brought a rebel element to it by making it an unusual fit. And then he's paired that with a hoodie, which is not usually what you'd see a suit jacket paired with. And on top of all of that, he's got this bag, he's got these really wide pants, and these really small shoes. Like everything about this is kind of, I wouldn't say like jarring, but it's unusual. It's not what you see every day. And obviously, you don't have to go this extreme, like I think I mentioned earlier with punk and goth and rockstar. Like those are all obviously very extreme versions of this archetype, but you can do this in much smaller ways. I think this is a good example of ideas of how to do this in smaller ways, but he's kind of doing all of them, right? He's doing the most. He's putting a lot of rebellion into one outfit, but you can do this in smaller ways, right? Choosing an unusual color pairing, wearing a sneaker with a suit, just pairing things that usually people wouldn't think go together, but making it work. And of course it has to work, otherwise it's not good style, right? Otherwise you're not hitting the aesthetic requirements. But if you can make something unusual or unexpected work, that is very like the Rebel archetype. So there are pieces of clothing, like let's say leather jackets or like ripped jeans that have a certain kind of Rebel read, right? So that can be Rebel. The fit of your clothing can be Rebel. The way you put your clothing together can be Rebel. You could buy all normal pieces, quote unquote normal, and just pair them in an interesting way, and you've hit the rebel archetype. Okay, let's see, let's move this over to my buddy. We're going to see a different version of rebel here. This is a buddy of mine, PGH Style Guy, over on Instagram. And here, this is a great example of like a rebel outfit. Like you can see, he's wearing a t-shirt. He's wearing a Grateful Dead t-shirt, right? Everything else that he's wearing is pretty rugged. He's got these jeans, they're pretty clean. There's kind of a refinement, there's a cleanliness to the jeans, even though they are a pretty rugged jean. He's got a nice kind of rugged jacket, a flannel, right? All the colors are going nicely together, but this mixture of this more like casual, but like rocks, like this casual band tee layered under all of this, like yes, it is all kind of rugged. You could say that it's overall a rugged outfit, but like he's tucked in the t-shirt. He's doing something odd. He's doing something different, right? And that is adding a rebel element. He's being a little bit more intentional and doing something unusual that sets this outfit apart from just kind of the normal sort of rugged that you would see. Here, let's find some others that I think really embody this. He does a lot of rugged mixed with refined, which I think is rebel in its own right. So he likes to mix different elements, and like I said, like that can be a version of rebellion. Here, like he's got dress pants and dress shoes on the bottom. We have, you know, a dress shirt, a dress sweater, and then he's thrown this denim jacket over it, right? It's this unusual mix that can add a rebel element. That's also adding a ruggedness, right? So he's adding a ruggedness, he's adding a rebellion in that same vein. And honestly, even just dressing well, like in today's day and age, this isn't so rebel. Let's move on to the here. His rebellion's a little bit more subtle, so I don't know if it's like the best example to give you a picture of how to really do this, although maybe in a way that is why it is the best example. Here, let's move over here. Here we go. Shoot, I lost my train of thought. Welcome to my podcast where I lose my train of thought. Awesome. Okay. Here is the Instagram for John's. How do you say this? John's. And I thought he has a really nice example of the rebel style. Even though there's like a lot of rugged kind of pieces, you can see that, you know, the sort of more Chuck Taylor style shoes, this style jacket, the way it's all put together, it has a very like rebel feel here, like this bright red, this kind of jacket. There's like sort of an interesting rock star vibe. Here we've got a blazer, a cowboy hat, kind of a ski sweater, and these slightly flared, cuffed jeans. Like he's doing a lot of interesting things, a lot of unusual things, and mixing a lot of unusual pieces. And that's giving us this very like rebel feel. Not necessarily that he's actively rebelling, but that he's just saying like, I'm my own person. That's rebel in its own right. Here, this bright orange, like just pop of color. Some of that's just saying I like fashion, right? And in this day and age, like that's pretty rebellious in its own right. That's what I was saying before I lost my train of thought. Was this day and age, dressing well is a form of rebellion. So if you are the rebel archetype, even just dressing well, even just walking out of the house and knowing that like the guys you know might make snide remarks, that you care about your appearance, like that in its own right is rebel. So you're going to have to be a little bit of the rebel archetype. Not that you need to be primarily, but I think everyone who dresses noticeably better is embodying a little bit of that rebel these days. And some people brought up, and I think that this is, especially the rebel is a really great time to bring this up. People mentioned after taking my quiz that you know, they got this, but they're also kind of this. And yes, we are all three archetypes. Usually you have a primary archetype and then your secondary archetype, and usually you mix those together the most. Your third archetype will sometimes be more like pushed away. Like for me, that's rugged. Let me move back. For me, that's the rugged archetype. I personally feel pretty uncomfortable when I'm leaning too rugged. And that's not to say that I won't use rugged pieces to add a rebel element to an outfit, but I just don't feel as comfortable with like ruggedness in general. That said, there are a lot of people who perfectly embody all three archetypes, and so really going out of their way to mix all three is where they're going to look their best and they're going to feel their best. And you can also evolve through archetypes throughout your life, right? You might naturally be more of the rebel archetype, but through your life you may shift more into the refined archetype, or you might shift more into the rugged archetype. And you know, different jobs can also flavor it. So there's going to be a certain amount that's coming from inside, but then there's going to be a certain amount that's coming from outside. And your style is really sort of like the alchemy of those two. So it's your archetype plus the archetype of your work, right? If you're naturally very rugged, but you're a lawyer, your work has a refined archetype. You have a rugged archetype. You can bring rugged elements into that refined look in order to feel more authentic. And that's what makes that personal to you. That's what makes that style personal to you. Okay, this went a bit long, and I have been all over the place. I hope that you've gained something. I hope you've been able to follow. I am going to continue putting out this podcast, and hopefully over time it will be a little less freeform and a little bit more organized. Right now it's really just a practice in doing. Oh gosh, another alarm. Today is just... Okay. Today is just... these first few is just a practice in getting things moving. So they're not going to be perfect. The information I think is still great. I think these are going to continue to be evergreen and really valuable and useful, but maybe not the best quality. So I do apologize for that, but we're going to keep moving right along. And next week, I'm going to figure out what my topic is next week. If I want to dive a little bit more into applications of the archetypes, or if I maybe want to pivot, shift, talk about something else, and come back to this. Let these ideas kind of stew and sit here for any of you who are listening. If you are listening, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for listening to this, and I hope that you have learned something. Please ask me questions in the comments below, whether you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify, and or you can come visit me at my LinkedIn, which is my main hub, and ask a question, leave a comment. I do answer all of them, so check that out. Okay, take care, have an awesome week, and I will see you next week.